Hey guys, subscribe for daily content. And if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks! What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review / knife overview to share with you guys. This is the Ostap designed Bestech Tardis, which is definitely one of the more interesting looking budget knives that has released here recently. Now, at base, this is really just a nested liner lock, but the way that they've made this thing look just gives it this wild aesthetic. Not everybody's going to like it, but I find it interesting as somebody who handles, as you can imagine, a lot of the same freaking style over and over and over again. This is kind of nice. It's kind of refreshing. This knife is available in a bunch of different configurations. And like I said, it's not expensive. It's definitely a budget knife. I will link it right down in the description so you guys can check it out if you want to. It does help my channel when you use those links, but that's entirely up to you. Thanks so much to my patrons for supporting me. And please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. Let's go ahead and get a measurement of this knife. Overall length of the Tardis coming in at about 7.6. My stomach is growling, sorry. 7.65 inches. Overall blade length coming in at, we're going to call that 3 1/4 if you measured at the base for sure, but about in the middle it's 3 1/4. Cutting edge, just shy of 3 1/4. A little more than 3 1/8. How about some size comparisons? Any custom skills you see can be found at Original Goat or Flytanium, linked down in the description. So up against the Demco 8010 and the Demco 80, well, let's call it the Demco 8010. It's the Cold Steel 8010 designed by Demco, and the 8020.5. As you can see here, it's a little closer to the 8020.5. How about up against the Spyderco PM2 and the Spyderco Para 3? A little shorter than the PM2, definitely a little bit longer than the Para 3. And then last but not least, let's put it up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue, and the Benchmade Bug Out. About the same overall length as the Benchmade Bug Out. How's the action? The action is actually pretty nice. It's ready to fall shut, no problem. I wonder if it's probably because there's a little more weight out of the tip. That and Bestech knows how to make a quality knife. They're definitely one of the best OEMs out there when it comes to budget cutlery. And this just is really good. You have this fuller that runs the full length of the blade, so you can actually dig in there and use it to reverse flick it, however you like to do that. I'd still say it's probably easier to use the thumb studs, even not so much reverse flicking it, but definitely just flicking it out, right? The thumb studs are great. The detent is really nice on it. I think it might just be the relationship between the break point and the thumb stud, but you can see here, it's got a nice detent. It doesn't make a whole lot of noise. I honestly thought it was going to be a little bit more clicky, but the click on the breakaway is pretty substantial, so you can really feel it when you fire it, and you can also hear it too. So yeah, that's nice. Access to the thumb studs is great, and they're reasonably comfortable thumb studs. I think they could have been rounded off at the top. Access to the liner lock for disengagement is nice. It's mainly just teeth sticking up there, but it does allow you to approach it from the side and move it out of the way rather than pushing down and this way, which is always awkward. And I don't know why companies do that because it just makes it more difficult, but this is done correctly and I really appreciate it. Your thumbnail will catch the area right behind the initial sharpened edge of the blade, so that's also good. Let's go ahead and do carry profile. So thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. It is actually a little bit thinner than the Spyderco Para 3. Length and height up against the PM2 and Para 3. In the pocket, this guy's going to be somewhat similar to the Para 3, a little longer. Definitely shorter than the PM2. Not quite as tall as either. And again, since it's not so thick, it really won't be that difficult to carry. Materials. We're looking at different layers of G10 here, and I gotta say I really like this cyan color G10 and the contrast with the black G10 parts. It also really looks cool with a two-tone blade, and that's coming from somebody who usually hates two-tone blades. Not like, part of it's satin and part of it's tumbled. I'm saying like when we have a satin and it's in contrast with a black, normally I'm like, I hate that. It looks so cheap. That's just my opinion. But because of the way that this is designed, right? Aesthetically, all these straight lines where you have black contrasting with other colors, it actually looks pretty cool. And it looks cool in pretty much any color. I like the red one as well. I just think it's nice, and it's definitely a wild contrast to what we normally see on knives. So I think that's cool. So we have different layers of G10. The blade steel is D2, which is somewhat disappointing. It's not the worst thing in the world. There's nothing wrong with D2, right? It's still a steel that I'm like, all right, you know, but if you're going to go above $50 and it's going to be D2, you better be bringing something else to the table. And while materials-wise, a lot of people are going to point out, it's just G10. Okay, fine, but at least it's interesting, right? And the price isn't that much higher where I'm offended by it. I wish it was 14C28N or something else, right? But D2, that's okay. You know, if they were charging $150 for this thing, I'd say absolutely not. You can take this knife and you can jump off a bridge right now, but that's not what's happening, right? So, I wish it was something else, but I'll accept D2. It's okay. And then we have steel liners, which actually run the full length of the scales on both sides. You can actually see down there those black nested liners. I do appreciate that they nested them. Let's go ahead and weigh it. I'm going to guess this knife weighs, 4 ounces, 3.75. A little more, 4.16 ounces. Not terrible, not a perfect ratio when we're considering blade length to weight, but also not really that big of a deal. The balance is actually right behind the pivot, and that's because there's so much weight in the blade. It's just a rectangle with another rectangle, but they're fancy rectangles, right? They're stylish rectangles. So, okay. What does that have to do with balance? Nothing. The blade is a rectangle, and there's a lot more weight out here at the tip than on something like, a drop point. That's why it ended up being so well balanced, right? Right behind that pivot. That's where we like it to be. So it really doesn't feel all that heavy. Let's measure blade stock thickness. Probably not a super thick blade. My guess is that's about 115 to 120 thousandths. And I'm getting better at this. 121 thousandths by my crappy calipers readings. We did wait. Let's do a hardware check. I'm going to get out my tools as per usual. My tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them right down in the section of my description that talks about the tools I use on this channel. Sorry, I was looking for my driver there. I'm going to guess that pivot is a T8 and the body screws are T6 because that's kind of what Bestech likes to do. So we have a T8 here for the pivot, and yep, that's right. And let's see, how about these body screws? Yep, those are also going to be a T6 because this T8 does not fit. Wish they were T8. That'd be great. That rhymes. I don't know why companies are still like, yes, we want T6 for body screws. Make the transition, universal transition. Come on, we can escape the T6 plague if we all stand together and hold hands and sing at the sky, or not, right? I doubt that the companies will ever move away completely from T6, and it's really not that big of a deal. As long as you have quality tools and a place to put your hardware, you should be good to go. Is that it? Yeah, let's go ahead and move into the meat and potatoes here. This is the type of knife that I look at, and I think this is interesting because it's different, right? Now, I think you can identify when something is interesting and different, but also not really aesthetically pleasing to you. And I think that's okay, because there's going to be a lot of people who look at this and go, yeah, it is different. It's a little interesting, but it's not really for me. And other people are going to look at it and go, this is a breath of fresh air, because it's wildly different than all of the, small to medium folding steak knife designs that we see not only in the budget knife territory, but in the premium knife territory. This is a little bit different. I always appreciate a design that can do something a little bit different to a lot of bit different, but at the same time, be fun and easy to manipulate and be a good tool. And that is absolutely the case here. The downside to a blade shape like this is you don't really have a tip. Yeah, you do. You can still poke this edge into packaging, right? But more importantly, you still have a functional edge. And on the flip side, there's no tip to break, right? You're not going to do that, right? If you manage to break this knife, you were using it wrong, period. Period. I don't care what your grandpa says. Your grandpa probably didn't know how to use a knife either, right? He should probably watch my channel. Learn a thing or two. Okay. All right, moving on. Like I said, I like all the different lines here. This is smooth G10 down here, and then we have a little bit of light peel ply texturing up here on the black parts. But this contrast and all these straight lines, it looks cool. It reminds me of that knife that kind of looks like a train. It's very similar in the aesthetic, right? I like it. There's a little harpoon notch kind of right here, and there's jimping that extends out quite a ways so you can choke up on it. It's just an overall very, very cool look. People always look at this and go, that's a proprietary pivot. No. You could use a spanner tool to hold it, but you just use the T8 bit right there. But anyways, the thumb studs are sort of the same cyan color. It's just reflective, right? They've just managed to do like a reflective finish of this cyan color on the thumb studs. And again, I wish that they were a little more rounded off, like a little more kind of button head, but okay, they're not. This comes down to, I would say, medium thickness. I mean, the edge will slice and cut, and if you're like me and you do a lot of draw cuts, well, this is definitely going to do it. It's also going to be a very, very easy knife to touch up and resharpen. But there's no curvature, there's no belly in the blade. So you're going to lose a little bit of slicing performance, but not much. I mean, it will definitely still slice and cut and do what you want it to do. It's just not going to do it quite as efficiently as something that has, belly. Does the Ritter Hogue still have? Oh yeah, it's still going, that thing. Hogue does a great heat treatment in their M390. But yeah, that's going to be the case here. The thumb stud is slightly in the cutting path, so if you cut straight down, you're going to run into it, but that's rarely the case. You'll probably still be okay. The Bestech logo, which is a lot of straight lines, actually doesn't look too out of place on this knife. But I always wish that printing and things, we move it back towards the frame if it absolutely has to be there, because this knife has a lot going on aesthetically, and it makes it that much harder to appreciate it when we have any billboarding anywhere that's easily visible, right? So I think the Bestech logo could have been smaller and kind of trapped in that corner, and Ostap Hell design could have been backed up against here. I can understand, designers and manufacturers wanting to have their logo on it somewhere, right? But probably not out like right in everybody's. This is hardly the most offensive version of this I've ever seen, so I'm complaining about something that's very minor. We have a couple of standoffs back here, which is fine. No lanyard hole, who cares? But sorry, if you like to attach lanyards to your knives, well, you're confined to one of the standoffs, which puts it slightly at risk of being cut by the blade, or on the pocket clip. Some people do that, right? It'll still work. I don't like this pocket clip at all. I actually really hate it. Why? Because it's very skinny and straight, and while it is almost completely hidden by this black area in the knife, and it does look good, it's straight, and then there's a dip, and there's this really long bill. Like, why do we have this freshwater crocodile bill on it? That's crazy. Cut it off right here. Stop. Right? It also could have been a little wider. I really don't like skinny pocket clips. This is just asking to be bent and broken off by the first merry-go-round that you walk by, right? Or if not merry-go-round, then something else with a lip, right? But yeah, I just don't like it. The clip, I would have said it could flip over to the other side, and it probably can, but it's going to be sitting on top of the G10 over here. So lefties, I think you actually can mount this clip, but it's not going to nest. And it doesn't need to, because there's two screws holding it in. If it's one screw holding it in, then no, it's not going to stay. It's going to wiggle around, right? But I think you can actually put this, it's a symmetrical clip. The bill of it isn't. So you're going to have the bill going the other way, but who cares, right? So lefties, you technically can mount this. It's just not going to mount perfectly. I think we should have had the nesting points on both sides. That would have been better, and definitely it wouldn't have taken away from the aesthetic, not in my opinion. It's too skinny anyway, right? We have a stop pin that is attached to the blade and running on channels carved into the internal nested steel liners. That's nice. You get great stability while maintaining solid lockup and really good action, obviously, right? Really nice action on this, actually. No blade play up, down, left to right, no lock stick, no pivot lash. Insanely smooth. Bestech's doing a great job with that, at least on this model. Kind of a thuddy detent, but a very crisp and fairly heavy breakaway, honestly. And then, can we see? It's so dark in there. Can we see the tip? There we go. It's actually perfectly centered. Final price tag. Final price tag on this knife is $63, which is okay. It is cool and interesting. And honestly, if I was in the market for something like this, I think I would go ahead and pay that. I would look at it and go, oh, it's just D2 and G10. $63 is a little bit much for just those materials, but what does it come down to for me? Do I like how it looks? That's what it's going to come down to. If you like how it looks, that's not going to be any big deal of a price tag to choke down, and that's nothing. It's not like they're overcharging by $100 or something like that. Normally, like other knives that are made really well and are just like, functional good buys, and they're D2 and G10, they come in as cheap as $30 sometimes, right? But we're obviously looking at a little bit more effort here, at least a little bit more effort in the interesting category. We have multi-layered, multicolored G10. We got a two-tone blade. Very cool design aesthetic. They did go ahead and nest those steel liners, so there's a couple of elements helping bolster that price tag. The price tag isn't super duper impressive to me, but the knife is interesting. If you think that this look is interesting, I think you're going to enjoy this knife, and it's not all novelty. The knife will function. It's just the downside you don't have a tip, right? So yeah, it's a cheap knife that I like. I'm not going to tell people to rush out and buy this and you got to have it and it's one of the greatest things of 2023, but it's a cool, interesting knife and I think many people will enjoy it. So I'm going to put this in my Cheap Knives I Like playlist. If you're new to my channel or you're just looking for a good budget knife, check out my Cheap Knives I Like playlist. There are literally over 200 uploads of knives that are both inexpensive and knives that I actually like, because believe me, I've reviewed many more than 200 cheap knives, and many of them I do not like. So if you want to see what else is in those playlists, or that playlist, and go ahead and check that out, but this will be in there. So thanks again to Bestech for sending this in. Again, I will link this knife and all of its variations down in the description. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.